Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Google Pixel 6a as we start heading towards 2024. To be honest, this is a phone that I never really expected picking up, especially because we did a review on the Pixel 6 just a couple of months back, and it shares very similar design as well as overall feature package. However, during the holiday shopping season on stores like Walmart, you could actually find this phone for just around $100 a pop. So this phone originally debuted at around $450 as a mid-range offering from Google in 2022. It was already considered as an excellent value mid-range smartphone. However, now that it's in the sub $100 price bracket, I would say it's kind of a no-brainer when it comes to the value for money that you're still getting, primarily because the CPU in here is exactly the same as on the much more expensive Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro, which is the Tensor first generation chipset, which is actually still a little bit more powerful than the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888. It's a 5G enabled chipset, 5 nanometers, so this is going to be great even if you're trying to do slightly more demanding tasks. And it is a more powerful chip than what's found on the Samsung Galaxy A54, for example, just as a comparison, since those two phones are now sitting at a similar price range. Otherwise, the camera quality is another huge reason to consider a Google Pixel phone. The computational photography and software processing is really what takes the performance of the still images on Google phones to the next level, and this is really no exception. Even though the sensor size is not quite as large as the nearly 1-inch type found on the larger Pixel 6 and 6 Pro, which has more shallow depth of field and bokeh effects, you can still get incredibly sharp, vivid, and a flawless point-and-shoot experience on here. It's using a 12-megapixel sensor, which is actually found on older generation Pixel phones. Furthermore, software support is generally not too big of an issue. This phone is slated to receive at least until Android 15, and it will last until 2027 when it comes to official over-the-air security patches and updates. And in terms of the overall footprint, it's another area where I think the 6A is actually kind of a win, surprisingly, now holding one in my hands. There is a 6.1-inch OLED 1080p panel, which is going to be more compact compared to the 6.4-inch display found on the larger Pixel 6. Although I wouldn't necessarily consider this to be an ultra small phone or really a mini-sized smartphone, it is a lot easier to hold using one hand and also to put into pockets if you are constantly traveling or on the go. Even the build quality for the most part is quite impressive. The phone has aluminum alloy metal rails that does make it feel incredibly solid as you're holding it, very premium and cold to the touch, although the back here is constructed out of polycarbonate plastic as compared to actual Gorilla Glass. It still feels quite solid, and polycarbonate has an advantage of not cracking as easily either, so if you are using it, you don't necessarily have to put a case over it, and it can actually be still a little bit more sturdy as a result. Also, the rail that kind of extends from the side bezel here onto the camera bar is also constructed out of the metal here on the top, and overall it is very well built. Aside from the primary lens, there's another 12-megapixel ultra-wide-angle camera, very practical, along with a dual-tone LED flash. One area that on most Pixel phones, though, that can perhaps be improved on would be having expandable storage. Unfortunately, the 6A doesn't really have a micro SD card slot, so you are stuck with the 128GB of built-in memory on here, but it still should be plentiful for most cases. The phone also packs in stereo speakers, excellent haptic vibration motors, just like on the larger Pixel 6 devices. So there's one at the bottom, one in the earpiece that gives you good stereo separation. Type-C port here on the bottom provides 18-watt charging, which can top up the 4,410 milliamp hour capacity cell in around an hour and 40 minutes. The slightly smaller footprint and display, which by the way is standard 60 Hz as compared to 90 or 120, also consumes a little bit less power. So this can still be pretty comfortable one-day phone, if not lasting about a day and a half before I had to really recharge it again on most instances, getting around 7 hours or so of screen on time, which is actually quite competitive. Otherwise, located on the right-hand spine is going to be the volume rocker and power key, which are all made out of metal, very tactile. Just a simple SIM card tray located on the left-hand spine, and then just that 6.1-inch OLED display, again at full HD resolution with a under-display optical fingerprint reader, which although not going to be 100% lightning fast compared to past rear-mounted sensors, it still is pretty good in terms of overall accuracy, at least in my testing and usage thus far. And of course, like most Google Pixel phones, one of the huge selling points here is having a super clean, unsolicited version of the Android OS. In fact, even if you're getting it from some of the prepaid carriers, you won't find any bloatware here at all. Just the standard Google apps in the Play Store is all you'll find, nothing to really uninstall out of the box. The Pixel 6a also is IP67 rated, so if you accidentally drop it into some water at the pool, it should still survive. And also, it does have built-in GPS NFC for contactless mobile payment, the latest Bluetooth chip as well, although you won't find Qi wireless charging, kind of expected at this price range. And like the other Google Pixel phones in its family, there is no standard 3.5mm headphone jack. Otherwise, this display, I have to say, is also very good for this price range. The sharpness here is excellent with the Full HD res, especially on a size like this, and although it's not faster in terms of the refresh rate, honestly, I didn't really find it to be too problematic. And that's largely thanks to the Tensor chip, which is nearly flagship grade when it comes to the overall CPU and GPU, and it keeps up when it comes to daily interaction with the phone without really a hiccup, never really missing a beat, unlike on other mid-range or budget phones, which may have less powerful processors. Although it does have a slightly larger chin at the very bottom here, it's also not distracting, and still has a very impressive screen-to-body ratio overall, with a small hole punch cutout for the 8-megapixel front-facing selfie lens. Otherwise, jumping into the software experience, again, it's nothing that we haven't seen before on other Pixel series phones. There is an intelligent widget at the very top that will display different info contextually based on what you're doing. For example, if you activate a timer, that widget will instead show the current countdown information at the very top. Alternatively, if you are trying to board a flight and it's nearing your boarding time, it'll be showing that information instead. So it's dynamic, not to mention the excellent voice-to-text transcription capabilities, which are nearly flawless and some of the best that you'll find on any smartphone. You can also use this for generating subtitles as you're consuming media, also using the onboard machine learning. So a lot of those smarts are powered by the Tensor chip, which is an area that generally sets apart the Pixel phones from the majority of other devices on the market. And by the way, that point is actually quite prominently displayed on their packaging as well, which once you open up the box, it also says Google Tensor. Again, impressive that they're using the same exact processor across the board, even on their more affordable smartphones. Granted, one point that we have touched on in prior Pixel videos is the Tensor chip isn't the most thermally efficient as compared to Qualcomm Snapdragon counterparts. They are manufactured on Samsung facilities, like on the Exynos processors. And so what that means is you do notice a little bit higher power drain compared to, again, a similar Snapdragon 8 Gen series or 7 Gen series phone. And similarly, it gets a little bit more toasty or warm if you're pressing it super hard. That being said, under some of the adaptive power saving modes, the phone will essentially learn certain apps that you commonly use, as well as at what times of day do you commonly use those apps, and optimize the CPU scaling itself back down or scaling itself back up accordingly to save on power. And that can actually work quite well after you use the Tensor-based Pixel phones for a little bit longer time, about a week or two. It kind of calibrates your usage habits and then sometimes improves on the battery life a little bit more after that point. You can also find adaptive charging function on here as well, so it will prevent itself from overcharging. If you leave it plugged in overnight, for example, it will automatically reach 100%, getting closer to when you actually wake up, so it doesn't try to charge as quickly and then stay at 100%, which can be harmful for the battery health over time. So a lot of those very smart, small perks that we loved about the Pixel 6, 7, and 8, you also do find here on the 6A. Jumping into the camera UI next, it is super fast to snap an image, shutter speed is almost instantaneous, and that's another area where having a slightly smaller footprint is surprisingly quite beneficial. I find it much easier to weld this phone at a moment's notice, whereas with a larger phone or phablet, sometimes you have to use two hands or fingers to tap and capture a shot that can take actually a little bit longer. So it was a very satisfying shooting experience. You can easily toggle between the wide angle as well as the 2x lossless digital zoom, the excellent low light photography called night sight capabilities, which are really the marquee selling point of Pixel phones originally, can also be found here. It just increases the exposure time to still capture a excellent looking results, sometimes even turning night into day if you're capturing scenes outdoors when it's snowing, for example. It really is magical using the software algorithms here. And again, because of the Tensor chip, everything here just flies compared to other budget and mid-range phones. There is no lag at all as you're swiping back and forth between the camera UI. And yes, you can also capture video at 4K 60 FPS as well. And when it comes to the actual results, they really speak for themselves. I like to call it snap and go magic because you can just take images rapidly at a moment's notice, and pretty much 9 times out of 10, you end up with an amazing looking result that you don't have to recapture ever again. It's super sharp, colors are vibrant while looking realistic at the same time, and just results in a very satisfying overall result. Here's an example of a low light shot that was captured in almost pitch darkness, but the night vision here is doing wonders in terms of still capturing plenty of details. So the default camera versus the ultra wide angle and the 2x digital crop, which using some of the additional software processing, Google claims is nearly lossless, and you still get plenty of details that doesn't look too bad, even though if you zoom in further from this point, it will be all done digitally, and it's not quite as good as a real telephoto zoom lens, but still is good enough, really. The ultra-wide-angle lens allows you to capture more as you are standing in the exact same spot, which can be quite useful, and doesn't have too much lens distortion at the edges either, which is also thanks to Google's excellent photo processing capabilities that continue to get better through incremental software updates that are pushed over the air. Enhancing the photos automatically using some of the AI powers on here to make it look even more vibrant or perfect for that matter can all be found on here as well. So you do get an excellent overall photography experience. In a way, it's not too surprising considering computational photography and taking the overall smartphone shooting experience to the next level was largely all thanks to the original Google Pixel smartphone. And it still shows here in terms of just the reliability of the results that you're looking at. So next, let's do a quick demo of the video playback and speaker quality. Takeaway being that the stereo speakers definitely make a larger impact compared to mono units that is much more typical at this price bracket. It makes it more immersive as you're consuming media, watching back videos, and the display here again is still plenty sharp, super vibrant because of the OLED nature. Netflix, TV shows, movies alike all look very good on this overall flat panel without any accidental triggers or touches because of the kind of nature here of the screen not really curving off at the edges. Very practical. Reception quality was also generally not a problem either. Even loading up at full HD resolution, you can tell that scrubbing between parts of the video clip are almost instantaneous. And again, plenty of horsepower here that it's not surprising at all that for things like multitasking as well as picture-in-picture still operate in a very smooth manner. Even for some web browsing with heavier pages, you can load up over 15 to 20 tabs, and I was still able to comfortably jump back and forth between those open tabs in the background without the phone really slowing down or reloading too much for that matter either. Pages load up almost instantly even on heavier sites. There's no kind of waiting or checkerboard patterns at all. Everything feels really smooth and responsive, which goes to show that price and context is everything, because when the original Pixel 6 and 7 came out, folks were saying that the raw horsepower of the Tensor chips may not be necessarily quite as high as the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen series. However, now that it's found on a kind of low-end phone that is so affordable like the Pixel 6a, it just becomes so much easier to swallow. In fact, it's kind of an amazing experience for what you are paying for. Similarly, when it comes to doing a little bit of gaming here and there, you won't be disappointed on the Pixel 6a. Again, the processor here being very similar and comparable to the Snapdragon 888, which is still more than capable enough here at the end of 2023. Any title from the Play Store will load back very quickly, including ones like PUBG, Asphalt, Genshin, can all play back really without any problems at all, even on higher graphic settings. And so ultimately, there's really no title from the store that you aren't able to install and play fairly fluidly on this phone. So that is more or less it as far as our revisited look at the Google Pixel 6a. So even though it's no longer the newest Google Pixel on the market, this is still an excellent value Android smartphone, especially since the Tensor chip's performance hasn't dramatically changed in the past generation or two. In fact, from Pixel 6 to Pixel 7 and then 7 to 8, the Tensor chips are still being built on Samsung facilities, so you still get very similar traits when it comes to the thermals as well as efficiency. You're only getting pretty incremental improvements of around 10% or so. So largely a very similar experience. Everything from the display, as well as the excellent build quality, amazing cameras, very good stereo speakers, in addition to general performance and some of the AI machine learning smarts that is part of Google's super clean software experience are all reasons to consider the Pixel 6a. So you can check out more details if interested in the links down below. Again, an amazing value, I have to say, that has been the Google Pixel 6a revisited.